Hello and welcome everybody. My name is James Waugh. I'm one of the directors of the Innovation Fellowship at Stanford Bayer Center for Biodesign. We welcome you to this webinar to discuss the fellowship, give you some information on our program, and really answer any questions about whether this is a good fit for you and your career development. One of our assistant directors, Sandy Ruggles, will be joining us shortly and helping with this presentation. We would ask that you put any questions in the Q&A, and we will plan to address them at the end of the formal presentation. So, what to expect for today? We're going to talk a little bit about the center itself. We're going to talk about our approach to innovation, specifically health technology innovation, the teaching staff that you would interact with as part of the fellowship. We'll do an overview of the year, what it looks like to be here, and then some updates around the university, COVID, and the application process. And then we'll save at least 10 minutes at the end to answer questions that come up in the Q&A. So the Stanford Bayer's Center for Biodesign has a vision to be a global leader in advancing health technology innovation to improve lives everywhere. It's an ambitious goal. And how do we accomplish that? You know, our mission is really educating and empowering health technology innovators. We bring people here to a unique part of the world where we teach a repeatable process of innovation that can be applied to healthcare. In terms of our physical presence, you can see Biodesign in the middle left of the screen there is within the BioX facility, also called the Clark Center, a center where medicine, which is on one side of us, and engineering on the other side really come together. And in fact, to be part of this facility, you need collaboration between medicine and engineering. I think Biodesign is really one of the flagship programs here that brings together physicians, clinicians, healthcare, along with our technical expertise on campus. Being a university campus, we also have the design school nearby that we tap into in order to help in terms of prototyping creativity. And of course, we also have resources such as the business school and others that we can use in the implementation phase of our process. We're also uniquely situated, of course, in Silicon Valley, where we have a large and diverse network of individuals outside of the program who have expertise in everything from intellectual property to regulatory affairs to you name it. If there's an expertise that you need, there's more than likely someone in this area who has been there, done that, and developed something interesting in the past. So in terms of the center, we have a number of audiences. We have our fellowship, which really is the cornerstone of what we do. We additionally teach some courses across the university and even more broadly. So we have fundamental courses for undergraduates. We have specialty courses around mobile health, around digital health, and we have a graduate course. All of which the fellows can be involved in to varying degrees, though not the core of what you would do in the fellowship. As a center, we also are managing an increasing number of translational grants from different funding organizations, but Coulter, Spectrum, et cetera, are seed grants that really fund projects or promising technologies in an attempt to de-risk them within the university and get them to a point where they can be spun out and scaled to achieve that goal of touching patients everywhere. Specific to the fellowship, we have a summer extension funding program that allows promising projects at the end of the fellowship to be funded for a several-month period so that fellows who wish to continue potentially take on a few risks of the project, anything from building a better prototype, to doing some initial benchtop testing, to developing an IP strategy, can be done on funding that's available specifically to our fellows once they complete the program. Finally, we have global initiatives around the world. We are involved in programs in Singapore, Japan. We have partnerships with India and Ireland, and the programs are continuing to grow. During your time here, you are likely to interact with our global faculty training program, where individuals from around the world who are interested in starting local biodesign type programs come and learn the skills to do that. And then finally, we do an executive education course, which is an annual course for healthcare executives around the country and around the world who are looking to bring an innovation pipeline to their organizations. The outcomes of our program we're very proud of. The primary outcome is the careers of the individuals that come into the fellowship. We really try to build a skill set around innovation. Again, a repeatable process of understanding needs, characterizing them, ideating, prototyping, and developing implementation plans. We also are proud of the projects that have come out, although it's not the primary goal of the program. We have had over 50 projects evolve, ranging from early startups all the way to public companies. I think what we're most proud of is that, these technologies have touched upwards of 5 million patients at this point, and that number is growing exponentially. One of the keys to success that I alluded to is real-world mentors and leveraging a local network of entrepreneurs, of industry experts, of regulatory experts who can really come in and bring the expertise needed. So everyone on this list, and you'll see some incredibly impressive names, is part of our network, interact with the fellows, and really provide that bridge between academia, industry, and what it takes to make it in the real world. So to give you a sense of what the fellowship looks like, at the core of what we do is build multidisciplinary teams. This is a team from a few years ago where you see Brian on the left, who is an interventional radiologist, Raquel, who had industry experience in human factors and design, Zach, who was both an engineer and an MBA, and Dimitri, who is a nephrologist. So you can see really diverse backgrounds in terms of skill sets. And we really believe that by bringing teams together, we can develop the next generation of leaders. We teach that repeatable process. And we teach both the fundamentals of implementation and industry, as well as how to work together as an innovation team, which could be the greatest skill that our fellows leave here with. In terms of the leadership of the fellowship itself, again, my name is James Waugh, and I'm one of the directors alongside Dan Azaguri. To give some context, we're both practicing surgeons at Stanford. I am a pediatric surgeon, and Dan does minimally invasive adult surgery. We both spend somewhere between 30 and 50% of our time on the Biodesign program and are hugely dedicated to the success of this fellowship. Backing us are an absolute superstar group of directors within the program. So Lynn Denon is the overall director of academic programs and highly involved in the fellowship. And then Megan is going to be joining us this year as our new fellowship manager, comes with an incredible amount of experience managing clinical fellowships at Stanford. And Megan is really the point person for the fellowship, and that's kind of the core team. In terms of additional directors of the program, we have Doug Raitt, who is our director for team learning and design. Doug's a PhD in psychology and brings team dynamics and communication skills to the teams, and really from day one enables teams to achieve more than the sum of their parts. In addition, we have 3 assistant directors who all bring an incredible skill set to the program and meet on a regular basis with the teams. Kate Garrett has an engineering background, was a successful CEO and entrepreneur, and is now in venture capital. Vic McRae is a surgeon, general surgeon by training, who did the Biodesign program and went on to become CEO of Tangible Life Sciences, and has given his time back to the program now as an assistant director. And finally, Sandy Ruggles, who has a PhD in basic science and has gone on to career in strategic marketing, runs a consulting firm. And again, you can see with that broad skill set, really an enormous amount of expertise and frontline experience from the team. In addition, we know what we don't know, and over the years we've evolved the program based on feedback from prior fellows to bring additional work streams and additional areas of deep expertise. So implementation, we have Gordon and Uday, who both have incredible operational and venture capital experience. In terms of value and understanding both the healthcare economic impact of technologies as well as commercialization implications, we have Jan and Cynthia, who both have strong backgrounds in healthcare economics. And then finally, engineering, we have Ross and Farzad. Ross, who's a Stanford faculty member and one of the top university professors in engineering, and Farzad, who spent a long time at IDEO and has a deep experience in prototyping and is now at Edwards Life Sciences. We have a global faculty as well that I won't go into too much depth, but if there is interest in expanding any technologies beyond the borders of the US, the fellowship generally focuses initially on finding unmet needs within within the US healthcare system. However, sometimes those technologies have applications, and we have a broad faculty who have experience around the world. Finally, we have an incredible support staff who back us as program directors and help out with everything biodesign, education, visas, etc. And really can't do it without an incredible staff behind us. Finally, just as a quick note, we do have some specific industry leaders who provide regular feedback to the fellowship. Hanson Gifford, who is one of the most talented health tech innovators, who is part of a group here called the Foundry that has spun out multiple technologies of incredible value, for both in terms of returns and patient impact. He meets with the teams regularly as they get through the ideation phase and want to bring concepts forward. Then we have Bev, Deb, and Maria, who are all experienced health tech entrepreneurs, CEOs, board members, and really understand the nuts and bolts of taking a technology commercialization. And they meet regularly as business coaches with the teams. So to talk a little bit about our approach, I think most people who are interested in this program have probably seen the basics or considered or even been trained in design thinking. We really believe that the core of what we do is starting with a really well-characterized clinical need. So for us, design thinking starts with clinical immersion, moves on to characterizing what those unmet needs are, coming up with ideas, asking questions and understanding which ideas might work through prototyping and testing, and then moving on to how it can be implemented into our system. So design thinking works, reasonably straightforward if you're Apple and you're designing a phone for a consumer who is the beneficiary and the person who pays for it. But when you get to healthcare, it does get a little bit more complex. And this is where we get into the details in the fellowship of addressing the at least 8-headed monster of healthcare, where the user is not always the person who benefits. The physician could be the user, the patient, the beneficiary, and then who pays for it is also highly variable and could be someone completely different. Layer on top of that, the regulatory issues that we face in our industry and the complexities are important to understand because they are barriers to entry, and understanding them early in the process can really guide you to a higher chance of success in developing a health technology. So this is our basic approach to the biodesign innovation process. As we characterize it, we really see it in 3 major areas. The first is identification of needs. So really finding those needs. Screening, meaning going through the needs and determining where the opportunity lies. Once the right needs have been settled on, then we move into concept generation. And then again, screen those concepts to see which ones have viability based on many, many factors. And then finally, implementation, which is really developing a strategy and a commercialization plan. And these are all part of the fundamental one-year process that you will go through in the fellowship. You see here our current fellows, again, very diverse backgrounds. I won't go through them in detail, but you are welcome to look on the website under the fellowship, and you can see not only this year's fellows, but you can see the bios and LinkedIn accounts of all of our prior fellows. So let's talk about the year for a minute. And this is really kind of the timeline for the entire year. So we start with a boot camp, which really is a time for two things to happen. One is for teams to come together, get to know each other, and start to understand how they're going to work together as a group, start building communication and a charter for the team. The second is to build some fundamental skills across all areas. So understanding some of the basics of the area that we pick for the year, meaning we take a different disease area each year. We've done this past year, we did nephrology and urology. We've done OBGYN in the past, orthopedics, et cetera. So it's a chance to learn some of the basics of that area. It's also a chance to learn some basics in terms of health technology, some fundamentals around things like the regulatory pathways and things that you may or may not have learned based on your diverse backgrounds. Next, we move into clinical immersion. I think this is one of the really unique opportunities for non-clinicians who join our program. We really open the doors to the Stanford healthcare system, as well as additional local partners, including El Camino Hospital, which is a large private hospital, and others. And we introduce you to the faculty members who are leaders in their field. And you are able to really observe healthcare up close and personal, and understand what it's like to practice. Also begin to identify where physicians are struggling. They may or may not be articulating it, but really starting to understand in person where the challenges are in the healthcare system, where patients are suffering, and where there may be an opportunity for technology innovation to help that. So once clinical immersion, or during clinical immersion, we really have people take a systematic approach to identifying the problems. That begins by really putting observations into a need statement. So trying to really flesh out three key components of any medical need. The problem, is there a fundamental mechanism that's the problem? For example, clotting of blood vessels would be a problem. There's a clear mechanism there and something that you can address. The population that might be affected, and that could be patients with all patients over 40. It could be specifically patients who've previously had a heart attack. Again, there's a lot of different ways to kind of think about which population could be best affected. And then ultimately the outcome that you would like to see in that population in order to make a meaningful difference in healthcare. And so it sounds very simple to write kind of a one sentence and identify those three things, but in those three things you've identified, is there something that I can solve? Is there something biologically plausible to go after? What's kind of the general size of the market I'm looking at? And then what's the general path, right? To prove an outcome could take 6 months, it could take 5 years, and those have implications for how you develop a technology. So this is meant to be unreadable because it's a list of needs that our fellows come up with in the observation phase, usually several hundred, and then put them into this format where they can then begin to understand and screen the needs against various criteria. Those criteria tend to be based on research and based on primary interviews, based on some information that's public and some information that you really can't get from Google. You have to go out and find it yourself. And so using information around things like patient impact, around the overall market opportunity, understanding the current landscape in the area, then that can be applied to the needs and the best opportunities to have an impact, where there's open opportunity and a reasonable market size, can be really validated. And what we go through is kind of a multiple stage process to do this. It's impossible to do deep diligence on 200 needs. So first level, we have to make some assumptions and estimations, but then we can, once we get down to 80 needs, we can get to more mid-level data, dive a little deeper, really understand among those 80 where the great opportunities lie. Deeper diligence when we get down to the range of about 20. And then ultimately, once we get to 8 projects, we really like to start brainstorming all 8 of them. Because frankly, there's not always a technology solution. You can have a great opportunity, a great need, and certain teams just can't come up with a solution. So at the level of about 8, we start to really build projects and then start to determine which of those projects have legs and ultimately end up with 2 to 4 by the end of the year, at which point fellows can decide, this was a great educational experience. I'm ready to move on to another job, another opportunity, but use this training in the future. Or occasionally our fellows, as you saw from the list of projects, will choose to move forward with their project, either through summer extension or moving on to other ways to resource projects and move that technology towards patients. So I mentioned some of the basic background research required. These are things that we teach and go through a process by which you can apply those to needs and understand where opportunities are. Once the opportunity is established, then we really go into brainstorming and prototyping. And not only just basics of the market size, but at this stage, you'll have developed what we call need criteria, where you really understand what the market wants. Does this solution need to be within a certain range of cost, because that's generally what's spent, or the healthcare economic impact of the disease? Does there need to be some usability constraints around it? Do we need to think about potential downsides or potential complications that could be created by taking your approach and mitigate those? Et cetera, et cetera. So we brainstorm lots and lots of concepts. It's one of the most fun parts of the program. But then we take it back to the reality of what we've established as the market need and see if there's a technology that fits. Oftentimes, ideas on a whiteboard are not enough alone, and prototyping is necessary to answer some fundamental questions. Prototyping can be as simple as just a looks like, could be works like, it could be a functional question or biologic plausibility. There's a lot of different ways to prototype, but we do have facilities within Biodesign and more broadly at Stanford that really allow access to everything from simple 3D printing all the way up to really designed for manufacturing, molding, and other opportunities. So in terms of, by answering those questions and doing further diligence, we filter down concepts really based on a couple of different things. We look at the pathway to the market. Is it going to be a long 5-year regulatory path? Is it going to be 1 year? Both of those are doable. You just have to understand the difference to really plan and resource the project correctly and make sure that at the finish line, it's worth the lift. We look at the physician, hospital, payer impacts and understand how stakeholders will be affected and react to this, and really understand what levels of clinical evidence or other evidence will be needed to convince people to use your technology. Finally, we teach the basics of intellectual property, and each team has a intellectual property coach that can help them navigate the early strategies. Filing, most of our teams will file provisional patents, and many of them will go on to convert those to utility patents. This is an example of a concept screening where a team really looked at the critical risks of one concept they had based on a great need opportunity. And you can see they were worried about a saturated IP landscape, a little bit worried about the business model, and that's great because those are the 2 areas to focus on to determine, again, if this is really something worth a heavy lift to move forward to patients. And then finally, when we get to that union of a great clinical unmet need, a technology that has the potential to solve it, we know what the risks are going to be, and we really dive into implementation. And this has become a full boot camp that we do towards the end of the fellowship with industry experts who understand the details of moving a technology forward, things that you may not have considered, such as building a quality system, understanding manufacturing concerns, looking at functional testing, looking at clinical trial design, and then ultimately, the nuts and bolts of actually, cost of goods of building a device and selling it at a reasonable number. So that's focused on towards the end as projects are developing. And again, in certain cases, either part of the team or the entire team, or sometimes a redistribution of interested fellows get together and they decide there's a project that they want to move forward. And if that's the case, then we are more than happy to help kind of assemble the resources to assist, starting with, again, the summer extension opportunity and moving on to various opportunities we have with local accelerators and national partners. Finally, in terms of the fellowship itself, we typically spend the last month of the fellowship enabling customization. And what that means is we really want, again, to focus on you as an individual, as a fellow, to have the greatest potential impact on your career. And so we want to customize that last month to allow you to explore opportunities that you may not have thought of before the fellowship. One option is to just continue working on your project if that's what you want to do. However, most fellows choose to take an external experience, and we've had fellows do everything from working at IDEO, where they are involved in strategic consulting on early stage ideas. We've had people work at large med techs like Medtronic and Edwards. We've had many who've chosen to work in venture capital, which is generally an area that's reasonably hard to gain access to, but we have a lot of great venture capital partners who enjoy bringing our fellows in and sharing the experience of understanding pitches and how investing decisions are made. So this is a really great opportunity. Some fellows choose to do this as something, do something that they never otherwise would get to do, such as venture capital. Some like to go to maybe a potential company they'd like to work at and consider this as sort of an extended interview. And again, some choose to continue working on their projects. And some have chosen to do other alternative things, which we're very supportive of, as long as it's towards your career goals. We've had a few fellows who've gone and done needs finding in underserved areas, looking internationally for needs and applying the skill set that they developed in the fellowship to more international health tech development. I think, more than anything else, we do have a lot of fun in this fellowship. We like to be together. I'll touch on COVID in a minute. It's been a little bit harder year this year with a lot of virtual meetings, but this is really fun. Healthcare can be stressful. This is real lives and real people, and it's always good to have a little bit of fun. So we do spend a lot of time focused on social activities. We have social budgets, and we really encourage, the teams to get together, as well as all 12 fellows at a time and enjoy themselves and enjoy interacting with the faculty. So on the issue of COVID, it certainly has impacted us as everybody, I'm sure, on this webinar. So when COVID hit, we were in the middle of our previous fellowship. The teams had already formed and bonded, and we had to shift to virtual. That wasn't too hard, as they were kind of ending their year. And teams from that year have gone on to develop a couple of really interesting projects that are moving forward. This year, we had to start in quarantine. Certainly made things a little bit more challenging, but we explored many ways to develop those human connections. And ultimately, we actually put one of our assistant directors, Sandy, in charge of the team of this year. We had 10 fellows, the team of 10, and making sure that we really tried to, as much as possible, deliver the full biodesign experience. So we had to rethink how teams got to know each other, how they socialized. We had to rethink how we opened our network and did networking events. And I think that has been very successful. But we're also very excited to go back more in person. And as of right now, the fellows are back in the Clark Center at Stanford. Stanford does have a requirement of vaccination to be allowed to come to campus in person. But with that, they've been able to come back they've been able to work together in a limited capacity, but certainly in a capacity that has brought the teams closer and allowed them to really take off towards the end of the year. So what does COVID mean for you? I mentioned the vaccination requirement. It's required to be on campus, which we think is the best way to pursue this fellowship. We are planning to do an in-person fellowship that will start around the first week of August in 22. And interviews are still to be determined. We have a general preference for interviews to be in person, but depending on how things are going and to be fair to our international applicants, a virtual or hybrid program is being considered, and we will come back with details on that as soon as we have finalized it. So with that, I'm going to say thank you for everyone for listening. This is our real product. This is every year at our graduation, we have a huge turnout from our alumni. It's a very strong alumni network. We're just so proud of the impact that our alumni have made across healthcare in developing health technologies, impacting clinical care, and ultimately helping patients, which is what we're here for. So important dates, if you're on this webinar, you probably know that applications have already opened on May 14th. This is the webinar today on the 20th. We will have an alumni webinar, so you can get the real nitty gritty and details from alumni who've been through the program. That's going to be on June 24th. That will also be recorded and put up on our website. August 13th is the final day to submit application materials. And early October, we will send invitations to interview. Interviews are set for November 4th and 5th. Again, still to be determined if that's going to be completely in person or hybrid. And by the end of 2021, there'll be decisions will be made, and people have some time, particularly our clinicians who run on clinicians in training who run on an annual schedule, from July to July. We try to give them as much time as possible, so you have about 6 month heads up if you'll be joining the program. Great. So with that, I'm going to finish. I apologize. We were supposed to, Sandy Ruggles, who's one of the assistant directors, was supposed to join me on this, but we had a little bit of a technical issue. So I'm going to switch over. We normally kind of go back and forth on the Q&A. And I'm going to start answering the questions, but you'll have to give me a second to read them. So we have a question here about letters of recommendation and who typically writes them. It's a great question. We want the letters to be from people who really know you and have seen you perform at your best in whatever you do. We actually have some specific instructions that we send to the letter writers, asking them for certain aspects of how they've observed you. But I think their reputation or where they work is much less important, frankly, irrelevant to us, more so how well they know you, how you've performed in a positive fashion in interactions with them, and how they feel that this training could help your career. All right, I'm getting a bunch of Q&As here. Let me get to that. Great. So I'm going to try and do these in order. So the first question we got from a little bit earlier: how do clinical immersion help people from design backgrounds? I think if you've got a design background, you're going to be very good at clinical immersion. You most likely have developed real skills around empathy, around interviewing, around getting to the heart of a problem. So I do think that you'll come in with an advantage or skills. And that one of the great things about our program is that we have people with all these different skills, and they actually often, the fellows, teach each other at different stages. But if you've done a lot of design thinking, you may not know a lot of around consumer. You may not know so much about clinical practice or healthcare regulatory environment and other things. So I think there's certainly a lot to learn. I think the other thing about clinical immersion is, it's pretty hard, especially in COVID, to get full access to really see the inside of the healthcare system. And we've gotten, we really have a strong partnership with the Stanford School of Medicine at the level of the dean to make sure that, our fellows are allowed to go in. We meet all the HIPAA requirements and privacy issues. And we do that so that we really get full access. This isn't just going to a doctor's office and interviewing them for 5 minutes at the end of the day. You're really following them around, seeing patients with them in clinic, seeing them in the operating room, seeing them in the home healthcare setting. So I think that the clinical immersion, the breadth of it, the scope of it, and the access is really pretty unique. So this is a question we get, of course, every year. In addition to the FAQ, can you really drill down on the criteria you look for in candidates? I can tell you it's hard. We really value diversity. We value diversity on many different axes, backgrounds, education, ethnicity, gender. We think it's important really as a key component of all of our fellows to show characteristics of problem solving, of really taking a passion for healthcare and understanding why you want to do this in the healthcare setting, and really understanding how you think this can kind of jumpstart your career, because that's what we're about, is building a skill set and having people go out and have a meaningful career in health technology. Someone asked here, does this fellowship allow people specifically from another country, design background? Absolutely. We have multiple international fellows this year, as we have for the past few years. So we are completely open to fellows from all around the world. We love it. We also, but I do caveat that response with what I talked about in the webinar, is that we do focus on clinical immersion and the development of technologies for the US system. Many of those skills can be adapted globally, but really the learning process is around developing something within the US. So if that's of interest, we're absolutely open to all international applicants. Another question here is that in looking at some LinkedIn profiles, someone mentioned that a considerable amount of experience is expected from someone coming from industry. There's no minimum, but we do like to see all of our candidates have some level of experience in the real world. So, specifically for engineering backgrounds, most of our candidates will have an advanced degree and a couple of years. There's no minimum, but it's hard to show kind of what you're made of in industry, kind of less than 2 years. So, a lot of our candidates are in that kind of early career. They have learned what it's like to work in industry, and they really want to use this as an opportunity to either get to earlier stage health tech development or to kind of build on the career where they are. So I hope that answers the question, but typically, straight out of your educational training is a little early for this program. We really like to see people have, some clinical experience in residency or fellowship, to have some engineering experience, whether it be startup or industry, it doesn't much matter, or other experience. We've a fellow coming in this year who's a healthcare economist, who's worked again for a couple of years. So it doesn't have to be, years and years and years, but we do like to see people who've had some real world experience. Thanks for the detailed presentation. What kind of visa is offered? So it depends a little bit, but we generally do J and H visas. And if anyone has specific visa questions or concerns, we do have someone who manages that program. The visa is sponsored by Stanford University, and it does require that really your full-time work is at Stanford and can't be elsewhere. That being said, it's a full-time fellowship, and I think I mentioned that at the start, but I do like to make that point, and maybe I didn't make it strongly enough at the start, but this is a full-time fellowship. So particularly clinicians will often come and say, well, can I do shifts at night and the weekends, or can I work a day a week as a doctor and then just do this the rest of the time? or others may consider consulting, moonlighting, other things, but we really discourage that. This is a full-time fellowship, and really it's for the benefit of your team. It's really unfair for a team to have someone who, has a potential conflict of commitment with something else. So we really expect people to come in and spend, the full 10 months with us, doing this as a full-time position. Someone anonymous asked about whether we consider big time institutions. They alluded to MIT in the application. It's not the way we score our application. We have really decreased the value in recent years on the relative value on specific educational facilities and specifically where you worked. That's less important to us as, again, showing that passion, showing your drive, showing your interest in healthcare, which really come through more in the essays. So the CV, while it's important, is not the driving factor for our decisions. Someone asked, they're in a postdoc position. Yeah, we certainly consider being a postdoc, relevant experience. So I think certainly we would consider someone who's a postdoc for the program. What does selected fellows do during the 6-month gap between selection and program start? It's pretty variable. Our clinical fellows, who often are in residency or fellowship, will finish out their residency fellowship. A lot of our industry or academic fellows will continue in their positions. And we do ask everyone before we make it public, even though we know who's going to be in the program 6 months ahead of time. You may want to continue working, and we keep that anonymous until you're comfortable sharing. A few fellows have reached out to us for opportunities who are able to come a little bit earlier, and we have been able to set up some, not really internships, but some interactions and some opportunities to learn that could be helpful as you come into the program. Someone asked about clinicians, at which stage they typically apply, what percentage of applicants are from medical backgrounds. So about 30 to 40% of our applicants come from medical backgrounds. We typically take, it doesn't really matter what PGY year, varying programs have varying times at which it's good to take a year or two off for professional development. As a surgeon, for me, it was in my PGY 4 year. But, medicine, maybe it's between residency and fellowship, which is after 3 years, maybe it's after your fellowship, or some fellowships even have enough flexibility to allow a full year of research and professional development, in which this can fit. So there's no specific answer, but I will say we generally don't take fellows straight out of medical school, but once you have some level of clinical training, that's the ideal time for an application. Is there a theme that fellows work around? So yeah, so every year, I think I talked about this in the webinar, but every year we have a specific disease state. We don't announce that until you get here. We don't like to recruit based on what we're in, and we don't think that you need to know ahead of time. And the point really being that we think it's really valuable, specifically for clinicians, to often try and innovate outside their area, or at least learn the process outside their area. As a pediatric surgeon, I'm very biased towards, certain, beliefs in my field that may or may not be true, but it's very hard to think outside the box within my specific field. And so we do think that being open to whichever area of medicine we rotate through is a great learning opportunity, which of course is the primary goal of the fellowship. Let's see. So yeah, another question around, so yeah, we just don't share the clinical immersion area ahead of time. Again, the goal is to educate you. I think you can learn repeatable process of health tech innovation regardless of clinical area. It also allows us to have a more dedicated group of faculty that you can interact with. I will say on the flip side, you don't have to innovate in that area. And my team, when I was a Biodesign fellow many years ago, we were doing regenerative medicine and observing a plastic surgery case, but we observed a problem with anesthesia that actually became one of our projects. So again, the disease state is about, having a specific faculty to interact with, a reasonable sized chunk of information to learn in an area, and then being able to kind of land and expand from there. Someone asked if we primarily work in teams of 4, or there are opportunities to interact with the other fellowship teams to share ideas and best practices. It's a really good question, and something that we are doing more and more of. You primarily will work within your team of 4 when it comes to specific, to your immersion and specific projects. But we now have regular check-ins where the teams can present whatever work they've done or what stage they are, and really allow them to share their best practices. So that starts as early as immersion, where people are sharing, we met with, these specific practices were really good, and you should, check this group out, all the way to, when they have projects fully fleshed out, getting feedback from other fellows who may have relevant experience from their backgrounds. I don't know the average fellow's age. It's not something we even look at, so I actually have no idea what it is, but it's really that experience level that I talked about. Someone asked if we, again, a lot of people asking about the key traits. I think I've been over that. Someone asked if there's a similar program in India. There is. There was Stanford Biodesign India was started over a decade ago. It was initially run by our faculty in conjunction with our partners in India. It's currently kind of graduated from to become its own independent program in partnership with us, and is based out of Ames and IT Delhi, I believe. But if there is specific interest in that program, there's a full website up for it, and I'm happy to, if people want to email us afterwards, we can connect you with the leaders or the fellowship leaders there. Oh, good question. Someone asked, is there tuition or fellowship support? And that is something that I didn't bring up. This is a funded position, so we pay a postdoc salary. You won't get rich in this program, but we pay a postdoc salary that allows you to support yourself while you're with us for the 10 months. There is no tuition. Someone asked if there could be exception for coming straight out of med school. Again, it's cumulative work. If you did something before med school and you think it's relevant and have some experience, that's great. I think if you've gone straight through school, we really do look for people that have some sort of real world experience, whether it be before or after school, in terms of applications. Someone asked if this webinar will be available. Yep, we are recording this and we're going to put it up on the website under fellowship application. Someone again asked about, do we consider applications from India? Absolutely. Even though India has its own program, if your interest is in coming here and learning more about health tech innovation in the US system, we are open to people from everywhere. Someone asked about an opportunity to bring a spouse to study at Stanford. It is possible to bring a spouse on the visa. Whether they can study at Stanford is sort of up to them to find a program and be accepted. But someone asked if any UK doctors, NHS doctors have been in the program. Yes, we've had one physician from the UK, and this year we have one engineer from the UK. How many applicants per year? We usually have about 150 applicants, plus or minus, for the 12 spots. And we usually interview on the range of 25 to 30 to find the 12 fellows. It depends on the country you're coming from. There's typically not a visa required for the interview. but we can work through that, when we get to that point. Someone asked about housing. We do have, once you get to the interview stage, we do have specific information and around housing that we can share. We also usually buddy up new fellows with an existing fellow. And, one of the bigger topics is, of course, finding housing and just knowing how to get around the area. Someone asked the upper age for application. There's no age limit either way. Again, we look for people with experience, passion, commitment to healthcare. I don't really understand the question. Someone asked about expense for interviews. We don't charge, but we also are not able to cover the travel costs. So that's something that we'll discuss if we, if and when we decide on a full in-person interview. Someone asked how many physicians we take in the program. There's no specific quota, but typically we have, 1 or 2 clinicians per team. So on average, we usually take somewhere in the range of, 3 to 5, 3 to 6 clinicians. Someone asked about regular workday. We certainly don't have you clock in and clock out, but it is expected that it's a full-time position and that you're professionals who will treat it that way. There's not a huge amount of variability, but teams, can certainly set the schedules around what's important to them. If certain teams prefer to start later in the morning and go later in the afternoon, or vice versa, to accommodate other concerns or home life, that's all, within reason. The expectation is it's just a full-time commitment. Exact hours are up to you. Great. Well, we're kind of coming up against the hour, and that is the majority of the questions that I was able to get through. So I thank everybody who joined. We will put this up live on the website as soon as we're able to download the recording. And again, thanks. We look forward to seeing your applications, and it's always great for us to see the incredible diversity skill set of people who are interested in this program. So thank you very much, and have a wonderful rest of your day.